Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. Today we have the next episode in our World in Flames Days of Decision campaign game, which means we are up to March-April 1939. Now, last time out, over the winter of 38-39, we saw a number of significant developments all over the globe. None more so, perhaps, than Germany being able to successfully navigate the Sudetenland crisis without triggering a shooting war with the Western democracies. It'll be interesting to see whether and how soon Germany can capitalize on that political success to improve her position. Further south in Europe, in Spain, we've seen the civil war start to heat up and maybe take a little bit of a tilt towards the nationalists. It'll be interesting to see what happens now as the weather gets better and the drag on offensive operations isn't as great. Meanwhile, over in Asia, the Chinese, looking at their situation, have decided on a strategic withdrawal from the eastern and northeastern portions of their country in order to form a shorter, more defensible line against the Japanese invasion. And the question there is whether they will be able to successfully pull that off, if the Japanese will be able to follow that up, or perhaps pierce the line before the Chinese have a chance to really establish themselves on that new, stronger position there. So there looks to be a lot going on this spring of 1939, so let's just jump right in and get straight to the action with the political phase. Well, everyone must sense that a shooting war in Europe is quickly approaching, because despite the fact that all but three of the major powers are actually running deficit totals currently, with only the United States, China, and the Commonwealth sitting at zero, we have five major powers bidding for political options this turn. And we'll run through those real quick. Both Germany and Italy decided to bid two for initiative position this turn, with Japan joining them by bidding a single money for position. And then the United States and China, interestingly enough, are also bidding one each. So when we factor in the bid modifier for their previous position, as well as some bonus bid points for powers that bid last turn in January, February, but were unable to have an opportunity to execute their political options, we see that Japan, who bid one, was one of those countries that didn't get a chance to get her political initiative done last turn. So she picked up a whopping 4 bonus bid points. Combine that with the +2 for her position last turn. That's going to give Japan a total of 7 and place them first this turn in the political phase. Following that up, you have the Italians, who bid 2 +4 for their last position of being first. That's going to drop them down with a total of 6 to second position. And then Germany is going to come in right behind them, bidding 2 also, but only having a +3 for a total of 5. So Germany slides down here into third. And we have China, who bid 1 last turn, did not get an opportunity to do her political option, so she gained all of a single bonus bid point thanks to her rather low political effectiveness. However, we also get to add in +1 for her 6th position, which is a total of 3, and that's enough to actually bump China all the way up to 4th here. That may be the highest position we've seen, or the lowest position we've seen China in the political initiative track so far this game. And then finally, the United States bid a single bid point. They've got +0, and that's going to leave them with a total of 1 and in 5th place, which means we're looking at the USSR, Commonwealth, and France, all of which bid 0. You can see France is going to get a +3 to that, giving her a total of 3, placing her in 6th. Then the Commonwealth with a +2 comes in 7th, and the Soviets drop all the way down to 8th. We'll place our last card here against the Japanese, and the United States was the lowest of the bidding major powers. So we've got 5 potential political options to resolve this turn. Could be a lengthy and busy political phase. And let's get started, see what Japan wanted to do last turn but was frustrated in her efforts, and now she's going to get a chance to do it here. But Japan was not happy when the political phase ended early last turn, because she was attempting to do Japan option 2, gear up, which she's going to now do this turn. However, she has lost essentially a turn of higher production. But there's not much we can do about that, so we're just going to press forward. It's an expensive option, which costs 9 when combined with her 1 bid and the fact she was sitting at -2 to start this turn. Drops her all the way down to -12, which is the most indebted we've seen Japan. And she does have a debt limit of 15, so she's starting to get pretty close to that debt limit. However, she should, with the upgraded production, hopefully be able to climb out of this deficit hole relatively quickly. As you can see, there's not a lot of minor country reaction here. We'll go ahead and mark that on the map. However, it is a more substantial U.S. reaction, with the U.S. entry increasing by +10. Now, I keep meaning to show you the war with Democrat U.S. entry roll at the end of each turn, and I'm forgetting. Now, last turn, the Japanese rolled a 4. They get the -1 because they played Japan option 6, which dropped it to a 3, which resulted in 0 change to the U.S. entry for being at war with China. So hopefully, if I can remember, the end of this turn, we'll go ahead and show you that chart again and let you watch the die roll there. But that does raise the entry, the raw entry against Japan, from +31 to +41 as a result of the gear up here. So we're looking at the overall U.S. entry starting to creep up now against Germany as well as Japan, and the U.S. may start to do some political options themselves here shortly to do what they can to try to hamper the fascist expansion. But that is in the future. For right now, we're going to go ahead and bump the production multiple up from 1/2 to 3/4 for Japan. I'll go ahead and record the minor country reactions, and then we will select a country to activate over on the map. Most of the reaction to the Japanese gear up occurred in the Western Hemisphere, predominantly in South America, with Argentina, Brazil, and Venezuela not liking it. However, Chile, Japan picked up a +2 influence there, and she added a +1 here in Mexico. So it'll be interesting to see if Japan can maybe get a partner in the Western Hemisphere that would certainly not sit very well with the United States. Could serve as a useful distraction. However, the country that Japan is going to activate is actually all the way over here in Southeast Asia. You can see Siam, Japan currently has a +3, in addition to a -2 for the Commonwealth and a couple of +1, -1 for France and Germany. So we're going to activate Siam and see if we can get Siam pulled a little bit closer to Japan, perhaps even into the fascist ideology itself. On the status display, we can see Siam located here just outside the fascist ideology, and we have our control markers from the 4 major powers with influence currently in Siam. Now, as mentioned, we've got a -1 from France. That's not going to do anything to move the marker. Neither will the +1 from Germany, so we'll just get rid of those right off the bat. Now we have a -2 for the Commonwealth and a +3 for Japan. And we have to kind of think about which order we want to resolve these in, as it may make a difference if we resolve the -2 for the Commonwealth being located generally right here. We zoom out a bit, we can probably bring her into the picture. There you go, just right at the top there, up here. So -2 will move Japan this way a hex. And then we would get a +3 Japan. That's going to be enough to move Siam across the border here to be a grand total of 3 to get into this outer faction of the ideology. Or if we do the +3 first, that will draw Siam here. The -2 will push him. So it looks like it's going to end up pretty much probably in this hex either way. So if we do the -2 for the Commonwealth, that's going to place it here, and then we can get the +3, which will be cost of 2 +1 to cross the border there into the fascist ideology. So, like Sweden, Siam has just crossed over into the fascist ideology. Both Germany and Japan would like to see these miners get a little bit closer to them. Siam's value to Japan is not so much in her military strength, but her strategic location. So It'll be interesting to see how things unfold politically with the little cluster of minor countries we see here flirting with fascism right now. Last thing we need to do is make a die roll to see if Japan prematurely ends the political phase here, which would not make a couple of countries very happy. Let's see what happens here. Basically, anything but a 1, and we'll be able to continue on with the phase. And the die roll is a 10, which means we do proceed, and next up is going to be Italy. Well, last turn, the Italians really committed a ton of resources to ensuring that France, and by extension the Commonwealth, could not interfere with Germany's diplomatic move on the Sudetenland. And that left her sitting at a -7 as far as money goes at the end of production last turn. The Italians bid 1 again this turn, dropping to -8. And they did so because they are going to be doing Italian option 2, gear up. This is, again, an expensive option at -7. That's going to push Italy all the way down to -15, which makes them not only the most indebted nation we've seen, surpassing Japan, who just recently went to -12 this turn, but it also puts them right at their credit limit. Now, hopefully for the Italians' sake, they're going to be getting something in return for that favor they did Germany, and it was a substantial favor that was quite expensive, particularly when they could have instead gone with this gear up last turn. So not only did they commit a lot of resources to helping out Germany, but they also lost a turn's worth of higher production because they put off their own gear up until March, April. Now with that, we said it does cost 7. You can see there are a number of countries that are going to be impacted by this as far as influence goes, and the United States entry is a +6, so not quite as dramatic as the Japanese gear up, but still a sizable increase in the Italian U.S. entry. In fact, it almost doubles it because they're sitting right now at a raw U.S. entry of +8. So with this +6, it's going to boost it all the way up to +14, which is also going to impact the, what I want to say, actionable U.S. entry level for all of the fascist powers. So the United States, with each of these gear-ups that are occurring, particularly on the fascist and to some extent on the communist side, is really drawing them closer to becoming an active participant in what's going on in world affairs. This will move Italy from 1/2 up to 3/4 production multiple, just like the Japanese. And having looked things over, the Japanese production is going to increase from 7 build points to 10 build points. However, if they can manage to get just a single resource more than they have now, that's going to bump up their build points to 11. For the Italians, we're going to see the increase here go from 4 to 6. So a 50% increase for both of the two junior fascist partners in the game. Not a unsubstantial increase for them, but Italy is sitting at -15 right now, and even with without building anything, it's going to take 3 turns to climb out of this deficit hole, and certainly the Italians don't want to stop all production for half a year. So again, we'll see how long it takes the Italians to climb out of their debt here, and perhaps they can get some help from the Germans down the road. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and record the minor country influences, the U.S. entry, and then the Italians will be able to select a minor country on the map, and we'll resolve the influence over on the status display. Well, not surprisingly, most of the reactions from minor countries came from those in the Balkans and the Mediterranean area, most of which was negative. Portugal actually picked up +2 Italian influence, and the Italians are tempted to activate Portugal to take advantage of that. It would be nice to help perhaps consolidate their power on the Iberian Peninsula, presuming the nationalists manage to eventually win the civil war, which is very much in doubt still. However, the Japanese just picked up -2 influence in Portugal, so those two would effectively cancel each other out, which is a bit unfortunate for the Italians. Rather than do that, however, they are, I think, going to go ahead, since they don't have really any good options for activation. They're going to activate Turkey, even though they picked up a -1 here. What this will do, though, is it will kind of get rid of that -1. It's not going to move the Turkey marker at all on the display, but it will prevent any negative influence from beginning to build up to the point where Turkey does start to move away from Italy and get pushed closer to either the democracies or the communists. So with that, we're going to go ahead and activate Turkey. This -1, I don't think we'll bother heading over to the display because it's not going to end up moving the marker at all, and we'll just get rid of this. We do, however, have to roll to see if Italy ends the political phase early. Well, I know I said I wasn't going to stop by the status display with this particular activation, but I thought it might be nice to at least kind of remind everybody just where exactly Turkey does sit. And you can see the markers located here just outside of the fascist ideology. And so being able to kind of get rid of this -1 for no negative effects, it prevents it from accumulating over time, which would again push the Turks further towards the capitalists or the democracies. The Italians do intend to dominate the Mediterranean basin, and so obviously not antagonizing Turkey would go a long way towards helping that out. Be even better if they could actually get Turkey on side, which you can see they're fairly close to doing. So it'll be interesting to see whether the fascists do make a play for Turkey here moving forward. But what we do have to do at this point is to roll to see if Italy ends the political phase early. With one political option by Japan already played, that's going to give us a -1. So basically a 1 or a 2 on the die roll will see the political phase end. And a 9 means it continues, which is going to make the Germans quite happy because they are up next. So on to Germany. Germany is not going to waste any time here. They're jumping right in, and they're going to play German option number 9, the Czech rump occupied. Now you can see the prerequisite for this is that Germany may only play this option if it has successfully played Germany 8 in a previous turn, which we did just in January, February. Czechoslovakia is not in civil war, conquered, or at war with, or aligned by a major power. So rather than take the chance of one of those disqualifying events popping up, and you never know, somebody could decide to attempt a coup in Czechoslovakia, which results in a civil war, very similarly to what we saw happen with Italy in Spain, and Germany just can't afford to take that risk. Therefore, they're just going to finish off what remains of Czechoslovakia. This is going to cost 6 money, so it is expensive, and combined with the 1 that she bid for political initiative this turn, that drops Germany down to -11. So currently, we have all 3 fascist powers in the hole by 10 or more. We've got Germany at -11, Japan at -12, and Italy all the way down at -15. It seems like the fascists are finally starting to really kind of get geared up for some major expansionary efforts here. Now, what does this do? You can see there's going to be a number of minor countries that are most likely not going to like this. And the U.S. certainly takes a dim view at +8, which brings the raw U.S. entry from +45 to +53. So again, combined with the gear ups done by Italy and Japan this turn, we should see a noticeable increase in the U.S. entry level against the fascist powers, and maybe getting to the point, like I said, where the U.S. is willing to start doing some political options of her own to try to rein them in. Now, what is the effect of this particular option? Czechoslovakia is now a German colony. We're going to remove the Czech marker from the status display. Czechoslovakia no longer has a partisan value. We are going to increase the Commonwealth's political effectiveness by a whopping 3, which is quite substantial, and is going to take her all the way up to 6, which now gives her a higher political effectiveness than even Germany, who sits at 5. We are going to increase France's political effectiveness by 1. So that is going to move her from 3 to 4 and put France on par with Japan and the Soviet Union as far as political effectiveness. And then finally, we're going to place 2 German infantry corps, an armor corps, a fighter 2, and a land 3 +2 pilots if playing with the pilot option, which we are, to arrive as reinforcements next turn. So this is huge. Not only is Germany now getting access to additional factories to increase her production base, but she's going to get 6, 12, 16, 16 to like 21 build points worth of units basically for free showing up next turn. That's going to be a huge boost to the on-map presence of the Wehrmacht right now, and it's going to put Germany much closer to being able to actually start to expand in less peaceful means, shall we say, moving forward. So you can begin to see now why the Sudetenland, demanding the Sudetenland, was such a critical option for Germany to get through, because it basically unlocks this German option 9, where she occupies the Czech rump, which does a number of things. If Germany had failed to successfully play option 8, her only recourse with Czechoslovakia would have been to declare war. Now, could she eventually conquer Czechoslovakia? Yes. But what that means is she would not have access to the blue factory that is in Czechoslovakia. She would be subject to partisan die rolls for Czechoslovakia in the future. Just, it would be a lot less beneficial of an acquisition for Germany than being able to just peacefully, politically absorb the entire country, as she has managed to do. And on top of that, she's going to see a huge boost to her military. At 21 build points of troops for free is pretty substantial, considering that Germany is building 12. They currently have the highest production of any major power. So that's like a turn and a half's worth of production that you're getting for free. It makes the 6 and 9 money spent on these two options, plus whatever they bid for it, well worth it, because you're getting that money back and then some. So what we need to do now is go ahead and record the influence changes here, note the US entry increase, and then we'll have to select a minor to activate on the country and head to the status display. Well, not surprisingly, it was the countries mainly in Central Europe that had the biggest reaction to this. Surprisingly, well, maybe not too surprising, but Hungary really liked it with a +3. Romania even was a +2, which offset the -2 that the Germans had there. Of course, Belgium and the Netherlands, neither one of them liked it very much with a -2. But Finland, actually, Germany picked up a +1 in Finland, which gives them right now a total of +3, combined with a -2 for the Soviets and a +1 for the Commonwealth. And I think the Germans are going to go ahead and activate Finland to try and take advantage of the influence they've got there now. And you'll see why once we get over to the status display. We can see here Finland is located just outside of the fascist ideology, and we've got our 3 control markers here. The Commonwealth +1 is not going to have any effect, so we can just get rid of that one, leaving us with a -2 for the Soviets and a +3 for the Germans. I think we'll go ahead and implement the -2 for the Soviets first. That's going to move Finland 1 hex away from the Soviets here, and then with the German 3, it's 2 to move a hex. It's +1 to cross any border. So the 3 will in fact be enough to move Finland into the fascist ideology. Now, this is also going to make it easier for Germany to attract Finland the last couple of hexes into her own hex, because there's a -1 to the movement cost whenever you're moving towards the major power within the same ideology. So even though the Germans spent a lot of time, effort, and resources trying to woo Sweden, they have also kind of stumbled upon Finland here as another potential Scandinavian ally, which is not that far from being able to become an aligned active ally in any war. That certainly would have implications for the Soviet Union and perhaps even for the Commonwealth. And so it's been a good turn, I think, politically for the fascists. Not only did the 2 of them manage to gear up and increase their productive capacities, but they've also managed to get 2 more minor countries into the fascist ideology itself. So the only thing that remains at this point is to see if Germany ends the political phase early. Now we've had 2 options played already, which is going to provide a -2 to the die roll, meaning a 4 or better is going to be required to keep the political phase going for the next major power. And it's close, but that 5 is going to ensure that the next major power up is going to get an opportunity, and that major power just happens to be China. Well, China was really sweating that last die roll by Germany because she had already been prevented from playing an option last turn, and there was a pretty good chance that it was going to happen again this turn. But fortunately, the dice went her way, and she's able to play an option. She really does not have any money to waste bidding for political initiative every turn for political options that never come to fruition. But that is not the case here, and so China is going to choose option 2, gear up. This is the 3rd major power we see this turn gearing up. It is going to cost her 7 money, which for the Chinese is just a huge amount of money, and combined with the 1 that she bid for political initiative this turn, that's going to drop her all the way down to -8 right now, which means she's flirting with her debt limit of -10. But it's going to increase her production from 1/4 to 1/2, and I would expect to see then her production sizably increase, which is something she desperately needs in order to stay in the fight against the Japanese. In fact, she's been producing basically, well, 3. It's been reduced to 2 with the losses to the Japanese invasion so far, but now with this increase up to 0.5 on the production multiple, she should see that 2 build points jump all the way back up to 5 build points. So that's going to be even almost double what she was doing prior to the Japanese invasion. Hopefully enough to give her a fighting chance to at least slow down or stop the Japanese. As you can see, there aren't very many minor countries that are going to react terribly strongly to this, but we'll take care of that. China will have to activate one of the minors. And again, major powers, when it comes to activating minor countries, they're only allowed to activate a minor country that they may control. And China has a very small list of those. There are 6 actually. So it's Iraq, Netherlands, Portugal, Persia, Saudi Arabia, and Siam. So one of those 6 nations will be the one that will be activated, and then we will have to roll to see if China ends it, because we do have one more major power in the form of the United States that is wishing to do an option this turn. So let's head to the board, get the minor country effects recorded, and then over to the status display to resolve them. This is only the 2nd option that China has played all game, and the other option was an option 0 to agree to a proposal which allowed her to sign that treaty with the United States, which means this is the first time we're seeing any Chinese control markers on the map at all. And since she didn't pick up more than 1 influence, either positively or negatively, in any of the countries, none of the influence she has on map is enough to move any of the markers in either direction for her. So since nothing is going to directly benefit China, what I think she's going to do, keeping in mind that she's still restricted to just those 6 nations that she can choose to activate, is activate Saudi Arabia here, which currently has a +1 Italian influence. Now, again, this is not going to move the Saudi Arabian marker at all, but what it will do is kind of blow off that Italian influence there, sort of wasting it and preventing Saudi Arabia from moving towards the fascists in a future turn. So we're going to go ahead and activate Saudi Arabia. With this +1, we'll go ahead and resolve that right here. No need to mess with the status display, and we can jump right to the political phase end die roll to see if China ends the political phase here, or if we are going to see a 5th political option played by the United States of all major powers. Okay, with 3 political options having previously been played, that's a -3 DRM. Again, a net result of 1 or less will end the turn. So on a, a 4 or less, the United States is going to be frozen out of being able to do an option this turn. Let's see what happens here. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happens when the Chinese roll a 2. So that is going to bring the political phase to an end, the United States will get a little bit of compensation in the form of 2 bonus bid points for next turn, assuming they bother to bid for political initiative. And I don't see why they wouldn't, since if they've got something to do this turn, they will more than likely still want to do that next turn. But that does bring the political phase for this turn, March-April 39, to an end, which means it's time to roll initiative, roll for weather, and then we'll head to the production circle to see what the reinforcements look like before we dive into the action on the maps. Well, things started promisingly for the Democrats with the initiative roll. They rolled a 9. Of course, they do have a -2 modifier to that, which resulted in a 7. But the Fascists rolled a 3. They are also saddled with that -2, which turns into a 1 for them. And the Communists ended up rolling well also with an 8. They are in the +2 box, giving them a 10. So the Communists won the initiative. They are going to choose to go last, since until and unless they have something that they really want to do, they don't see any reason for risking their +2 initiative die roll modifier, which means the Democrats, having beaten out the Fascists, are actually going to go first this turn, followed by the Fascists and then the Communists. Unfortunately, the Democrats' hopes were spoiled a bit by the weather roll, which was a 1, just an absolute the worst we could have rolled. There was a +1 from the previous weather roll from last turn, which ended up with a final result of a 2 in March-April, which is still not pretty. It's going to be blizzard in the Arctic, snow in North Temperate, storm in the Mediterranean, rain in North Monsoon, and then storm in both South Monsoon and South Temperate. So probably not a lot of activity going on in this particular set of impulses, particularly in Spain, where much of the country is in the Mediterranean and thus under storms right now. But the snow probably works out pretty well for the Chinese, actually. So we'll see what actually happens in the upcoming impulses in a moment. First, we need to go ahead and get the reinforcements, and we're looking at this slice of the reinforcement circle. We'll start here, I guess, with the ships. The United States is getting the USS North Carolina actually on map, while the Italians are going to be getting the Roma going into the construction pool. We've got a number of carrier planes here for the Japanese. The French get 1. The Commonwealth actually get 2. None of them are anything really to write home about, although I will say that the 3 air-to-air and the 3 air-to-sea factor is pretty much kind of the frontline carrier planes that you see right now in 1939. The Commonwealth has, actually they have the Queens here, which is a very nice fast transport, which is going to be going into the construction pool. I would think that they are going to be trying to finish those up as quickly as they can. So for now, we've got a bevy of carrier planes that are probably likely going into the reserve pool, at least for the moment. The Italians, in addition to Roma, also get a submarine, which they're going to be placing in the construction pool. It's actually a pretty nice submarine, good speed, good range. The Germans, as you can see here, have a good garrison. They also have some Henschel 123s. I'm just going to place those in the reserve pool for the moment. The Commonwealth gets some Gladiators, again, right to the reserve pool. However, because the Commonwealth is getting a pilot, that's actually going to bring their total up to 4. I would expect those Gladiators to come right onto the map here momentarily, along with at least one of those carrier planes. The Chinese get a big reinforcement in the form of Chang, and the French also get a nice infantry headquarters. The Soviets are going to pick up a pilot. That'll be their first on the track here. They do have some aircraft in the reserve pool, so we'll take a look at that and see if they decide to pull anything out. They are also getting a mech corps, and then finally the Japanese are adding a pilot as well. That's going to bring their total to 4. And of course they got a, what is for the time, a fairly decent carrier plane. We'll have to take a look and see if they're going to actually get anything on map. So I'll take a look at that. I'll place the 4 land reinforcements for sure, along with any additional aircraft that are coming on map. The United States did get North Carolina too, and then we will jump right into the Democrats leading off the turn with impulse number 1. We'll start the turn here in Spain with the Democrats' first impulse. The Commonwealth has been slowly bringing back HMS Eagle from the Far East in order to upgrade the carrier group that's on there, and they will use a naval move to send Eagle into the Bay of Biscay, which will be enough to get her rebased back to the UK this turn, allowing them to swap out the carrier plane over the next couple of turns and then hopefully get it back out to the Pacific before she's needed there. For the rest of the Democrats in Spain, again, we are looking at storm below the weather line here. Movement point costs are doubled, and we're looking at combat penalties. So I think the only thing really the Republicans are going to be able to do is start to move this division out of Valencia to try and bolster the line somewhere. There's not a big threat of nationalist attacks this impulse yet, so we'll just wait and see what the better weather brings. But after the successful nationalist attack last turn, I think it was, maybe it was the turn before, the Republicans are a bit on the back foot right now and kind of in a reactive mode, at least until they can start to get some reinforcements showing up on map. That's going to be another turn or two. So with that, I think the French don't have any movements, even though they did receive that new HQ. They're content to leave that where it is. Actually, you know what? I think they will just shift that 1 hex there, so that's fine. And I think in that case, we are ready to head over to China and take a look and see what the Chinese are going to be doing here. The snow hopefully won't impact their plans too much this impulse. Over here in China, the snow really shouldn't impact the Chinese plans that much, since they're looking at primarily just withdrawing to the strategic line we had mentioned or talked about last turn. I think what they're going to do is actually use a rail move to rail this garrison down here into Nanking. That should free up the 17th Army here, which can move into the hex here with 14th Army, providing a little more better defense here before withdrawing directly across the river. Down in the south, they would like to go ahead and try and close up this gap at the end of the line, the southern end of the line, but the mountains are going to invert the Cantonese militia if they move in there. And since it is currently rain in north monsoon, moving into the hex will also put the Chinese unit out of supply, so that would make it pretty easy pickings for the Japanese. I think instead they will just kind of bide their time, see if we can get a little better weather roll on the next set of impulses to be able to move into there without necessarily going out of supply and being easy prey for the Japanese. Other than that, I don't see too much the nationalists are going to do. Again, they do want to kind of shift this line further south, and it's just going to be a matter of waiting for a little better weather to do so, I think. So that's it for the Democrats' first impulse. Again, not a very active one considering the poor weather everywhere. We'll take a look at the fascists up next and see if they do anything a little bit more exciting, although I kind of doubt we're going to see much in the way of activity from anyone here in the first few impulses at least. Staying here in Asia with the Japanese, they are going to spend 7/10 of an oil for the combined impulse that they're doing. And we'll start off with their naval movement. Basically just going to have the fleet escort this transport out here carrying the Sapporo militia. We'll place them in the 3 box, I think. We've got no rail moves, we've got no air activity, so we'll go right on to their land moves. Again, they're limited to 3 land moves because of the combined, but they are going to just kind of shuffle some units here. They've got the good army sliding down, bringing the headquarters down to keep the 16th Army here in supply, and then just kind of backfilling along the line with another unit out of Peking. I think that is going to be all she wrote for the Japanese in yet another kind of quiet impulse. But they are across the Yellow River, at least here. They've got another resource that is within grasp, as well as the major port here at Qingdao. So Japanese should be able to at least gain some ground this turn with the Chinese strategic withdrawal underway. We'll see if they're able to actually kill any of the Chinese and keep that attrition curve working against them. So that's it for now. Let's see if we've got anything over in Europe. I'm sure the nationalists might have a little thing or two. I know the Germans have a couple of minor redeployments. I don't even know if I'll bother wasting your time showing you those. They received that garrison corps this turn as a reinforcement, and I think they're just going to slot it into the southern end of the Western Front, the future Western Front, facing the Maginot Line there, and then occupying some parts of Czechoslovakia. So over to Europe to see what the fascists do there. Well, like the Republicans, the fascists are not going to be doing much of anything this impulse due entirely to the bad weather. They are going to use their rail move, however, to redeploy this garrison corps down along the rail line here out to the west into Sevilla, which will hopefully free up this 5th Corps here to be able to do some stuff. The only other move they have is sliding the cavalry right here, again with the storms down here in the Mediterranean. That's going to be 2 movement point costs, and then they just don't have enough to get into the mountains without inverting themselves. And the major powers are trying to learn a lesson from, was it January, February, or maybe it was November, December, where the turn ended up being a rather long turn despite starting off with some really bad weather. So everyone's hoping the weather improves. Well, I don't know if the Republicans are necessarily hoping that the weather improves. I think they would be just fine with a really bad spring that ends early, allowing their reinforcements to show up, while the nationalists do have some operations in mind. They just need for the weather to clear for them to go ahead and be able to execute those, try to pull it off, and hopefully break this civil war wide open in their favor. Again, the Germans have just shuffled a few corps back and forth. The question for Germany now, as we take a look at Germany, the question now, having exhausted her ability to pick up some territory in Europe peacefully with the seizing of Czechoslovakia, the absorption of Austria earlier, even the bloodless invasion of Denmark. Now the question for Germany is east first or west first. We've got Poland here. That would be maybe the next logical step for the Germans. The problem is the Poles have an alliance with the French, which means that any German declaration of war on Poland is going to expose Germany to a declaration of war in turn from France and the Commonwealth, given that they both have a level 3 treaty with one another. So does Germany, instead of continuing to push eastwards and grabbing Poland, does she instead maybe try to go west first and take out the threat of the French, freeing up her rear, as it were, to allow her to drive eastwards unmolested? That's going to be the big question, and I don't know that the Germans have been able to answer that one way or another, but they're going to have to come up with some answer for it in the not too distant future, because the clock is ticking. We are already into March, April 1939, and the Allies are going to start to be able to field some sizable forces on map, making the initial task for the Germans that much more difficult. So if Germany can strike early enough, quickly enough, she's going to have better chances of success. And as you can see, we've got some corps sort of floating around here, heading back and forth east to west. What they'd like to do, the Germans really want to mass, obviously, as much power as they can on whichever front they decide to move on, but they'd like to keep everybody else guessing as long as possible. Now, whether they'll be successful, that remains to be seen. But for now, we are moving on to the communist first impulse, and there's nothing really to see here. There's been no change in the board state for the Soviets here in Europe. They've added just a few reinforcements over the past couple of turns. However, the last reinforcement, if you'll recall, was a mechanized corps, this 6-6 here, which they decided, interestingly enough, to place here in Khabarovsk. And looking around, they've got not a lot, but they do have a fair number of units here in the far east of Siberia. Perhaps they're contemplating a move against the Japanese while the Japanese are tied up in Manchuria. We'll see what happens there. As far as the Chi-Coms go here, they are pretty much set for now. They're not going to be redeploying. They just don't have any excess units to kind of shuffle around. They'd like to get Mao out of the front line if at all possible, but that's going to have to wait until they actually get some reinforcements on the map, and the nationalists aren't quite ready for them to give up the city of Changchao here. So we will see what happens when the good weather returns to China this turn. That's going to do it for now. We'll move up the impulse marker another 2 boxes, and we'll make the next weather roll. Hopefully the weather will be a little bit better and we can see something start to happen on map. Well, there it is. Yet another 1 on the weather roll. So what this means is we have the exact same weather as we had last set of impulses, where it's blizzard in the Arctic, snow in the North Temperate, storm in Med, and rain in North Monsoon. This means pretty much a repeat of what we saw, or really didn't see, in the first set of impulses. In fact, I don't know that there's really anything to show you guys. Here in Spain, if we take a quick look there, the only thing I think the Republicans are looking at doing is, again, sliding the division a little further up the line there into a more central position, but that's about all they really can do right now. The Commonwealth doesn't have much else. Actually, that's not true. If we pan up a little bit, we can see that the Commonwealth did go ahead and decide to place those gladiators on map, and they are going to ship them out in a transport down here to Cape St. Vincent and send them out somewhere to provide some fighter cover for the Empire. Probably going to end up in Gibraltar for now, at least. Other than that, again, the French don't have really anything to do. The Chinese, looking there, they really are content to kind of stay where they are given the weather, knowing that the Japanese are not going to be in a position to make any attacks given the combat penalties of the bad weather. So what I think I'll do is just go ahead and shift some more of the German units, get them a little closer to where they are going as far as the redeployment is concerned. I'll make another weather roll. If it's another really bad weather roll like this, I'll probably just kind of roll through this turn until we either end the turn or we get some better weather and something of interest is going to happen. I can tell you right now, there's no chance for the turn to end after this second Democrat impulse. However, the turn could end after the fascist next impulse if a 2 or less is rolled, and then it'll be a 3 or less after the communist next impulse. So we've already gotten to the point where the turn is potentially going to end, and so let me just kind of roll through this, and like I said, we'll either get to the end of the turn or we'll get to a point where something worth watching is happening. Well, there it is. That seems to be the theme of the turn here. The first end of turn die roll was a 2 or less after the fascist second impulse, and they managed to roll yet another 1 to join the 2 1s that were rolled for weather this turn. So it was a very short, extremely uneventful turn. I'll give you a quick pass over the map board just to show you where everything ended up. In Spain, the only thing you really missed was the nationalist cavalry unit moving into the mountains there. Over in Germany, you can see they've got some, again, some corps that are continuing on the move. They've got this 6-4 that's coming west. They moved a 5-3 infantry corps up north here near the Netherlands, but they still have this kind of bad but quick infantry corps moving east to join some units that are on the Polish border. As we continue over into Asia, this is about the only place where something of note did occur this turn. That's where the Japanese 16th Army pushed down and did seize the resource there. The Japanese have not yet taken Qingdao, the major port there. However, even though this army is 2 hexes from the headquarters, they're on the coast, which will allow them to trace back across the China Sea to Japan. So they are still in supply. Other than that, the Japanese southern front didn't even budge at all this whole turn, again because of the rain down there. So again, an uneventful turn. They did end up landing the Sapporo militia here in Port Arthur, but that's about as far as they got before the turn ended, which means now we're going to roll into return to base. We're going to do final reorganization and U.S. entry. And speaking of U.S. entry, let's go ahead and maybe just a touch out of sequence, but I want to take you over here and I'll show you the War with Democrat table that we looked at once before but have not seen since. This is the table that we're rolling to increase or decrease the U.S. entry level against any major power that is currently at war with a Democrat major power. That's right here. So this is what we've been rolling on for Japan that you really haven't seen me do on camera yet. So we'll just do this real quick here. You can see we're going to get +1 per year at war, and we're into 39. So war was declared. Let me see, back when did Japan declare war on China? That was March, April 38. So this is the 1-year mark, actually. So we are going to start using the +1 modifier here. +1 per each other major power at war with a Democrat. Right now, those are the only 2 countries at war, so that's not going to apply. But the -1 for the Japan 6 option has been is in effect. So the -1 is going to cancel out the +1, and it's just going to be a straight up die roll. You can see unless we roll a 6 or higher, the U.S. entry level is not going to change. It could even decrease if we roll a 3 or less. So let's see what the roll looks like here for March, April. And it's, well, that's kind of typical. Theme of the turn, it is a 1, which if we look back at the chart means that the U.S. entry level against Japan actually decreases by 1. I guess maybe that's kind of fitting, seeing as there's not a whole lot going on. I don't think the Japanese occupied any Chinese cities, because we do also roll on this chart not only once at the end of the turn, but we do roll every time the Japanese occupy a Chinese city. And in fact, they did. They occupied Siam. So let's go ahead and roll for the occupation of that city. Again, the modifiers remain +0 as they the -1 and +1 cancel out. See what happens here if they can get a better roll. There's an 8, so I think this is going to offset and then some the -1 we just had. So as we look back at the chart here, you can see an 8 or 9 is a +2. So we get the -1 for the turn, +2 for the fall of the city. That's going to give us a net +1 to U.S. entry. I'll go ahead and record that, and when I record that, I'll also recalculate the current U.S. actionable entry level against the various major powers, just to give you an idea, because we've had a couple of gear ups. We've had Czechoslovakia basically absorbed by the Germans. There have been some things that have had some sizable U.S. entry impacts in the last turn or 2, and I think it'll be interesting to see just where things sit right now. So let me go ahead and take care of that, and then we'll give you a brief review of that before we get into production. Now we can see here the currently updated U.S. entry levels against all of the major powers. Each of the columns here shows what I'm calling the raw U.S. entry is against that particular major power, but there is a formula here to determine what the actual U.S. entry level is in terms of being able to do stuff in the game. And that's what you'll hear me refer to as the actionable U.S. entry. So while the raw entry against Germany is 53, the actionable U.S. entry is 37. There are a couple of U.S. options, there's probably about 4 or 5 altogether, U.S. political options that the U.S. plays when you're using days of decision that take the place, or rather are the equivalent of the U.S. options that are played using just the straight whiff U.S. entry system. And there are some prerequisites in order for those political options to be played. The first political option that can be played that affects the Germans and the Italians requires that the U.S. entry level against Germany plus the U.S. entry level against Italy to be 55 or greater. And you can see with a 37 right now and a 17.5, that sits right at 54.5. So they're only 1/2 away from meeting that requirement. That requirement also, though, or that particular option also requires, in addition to the entry levels of Germany and Italy to be greater than 55, is that that Germany be at war with the Commonwealth. And so we've got a little bit more to go before the U.S. can really start in on that. But once the shooting war between Germany and the Commonwealth does start, the U.S. is not that far away from being able to start to make its presence felt. Now, as far as Japan goes, the first political option that the U.S. can do that sort of targets Japan is to move the fleet to Pearl Harbor. That requires a Japanese U.S. entry level against the Japanese of 35, and they're sitting right now at 26.5. It also requires the Japanese to be at war with the Democrat, which they are with China. So if the Chinese war drags on with Japan for a bit longer, we can see the U.S. in a position where they can start to play that option against the Japanese. And then what that does, when that happens, we'll get into the specifics of that, but when the U.S. plays that political option in days of decision, the equivalent, there are probably 2 or 3 U.S. entry options from the WIF U.S. entry system that will then be considered to have been played and take effect. And then I think the next step after that is the strategic oil embargo, which rattles off another big chunk of U.S. entry options. So all that, I think, though, is a ways down the road in the future for the game, probably at least, I don't know, maybe a year away, although it really depends on how things go in China. And for that, we're going to need a little bit better weather than we saw this turn. So just an update here on U.S. entry levels. Now I'll go ahead and take care of the return to base and then do production. And we'll update you there and see what everybody decided to build this turn. Turning now to production, we did have some changes in the build point production of several of the major powers, which is expected given the number of gear ups we saw this turn. Italy has increased their production now to 6 build points. Japan likewise has increased to 10 build points. The other change was in China. I think earlier I said that the gear up was going to bump her production up to 5, which it would have except for the last impulse where the Japanese seized another resource in eastern China. That unfortunately was enough to drop China back down to 4 build points, but that's still double what she was producing over the last several turns since the Japanese invasion, and it's still one better than she started the game at. So if China can maybe get some resources from some other major powers, she still has some excess factory capacity at this point. The issue is that the Japanese now are starting to press inland deep enough to start cutting some of the rail lines, which may render those factories useless because they won't be able to get any resources to them. So the Chinese real only hope is some help from abroad, which doesn't seem likely anytime soon, or to continue to gear up her productive capacity, but that's gonna have to wait until at least next year. So what did everyone build? Well, with the amount of political options we saw unfolding, and expensive ones at that, production has been scaled back quite a bit for a number of countries, particularly on the Axis side, as they're trying to dig themselves out of that deficit they put themselves in with the political options. So we'll start with Italy. Italy began training a pilot for a total of 2 build points, and that's all she's going to produce this turn. Germany, likewise, is also similarly restricting themselves to building just a single-engine land bomber for a grand total of 2 build points. Japan is going to be the big spender on the fascists this turn. They're laying down another carrier for 2, and they are building a carrier group, a carrier plane, for an additional 1. So that's a grand total of 3 build points spent by the Japanese. Turning now to the communists. The Soviet Union is building another armor corps, and they are also beginning to train some pilots for a total of 8. So you can see right there that the USSR alone outbuilt all of the fascist powers combined. Moving on to the democracies, France is trying to strengthen her Air Force with a twin-engine fighter and a pilot. It wasn't too long ago that the French Armée de l'Air was on a par with the Luftwaffe. However, since then, the Luftwaffe has added a considerable number of aircraft and now outnumbers the Armée de l'Air. I think it's 3 fighters to 2 and 4 bombers to 1. So trying to correct some deficiencies in their air strength, the French are going to try and concentrate probably on their Air Force over the next couple of turns. They have to be careful, though, because they don't really have a lot of stuff on the ground yet either. And you can have all the aircraft in the world, but if you don't have the boots on the ground to protect those air bases and your borders, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. So we'll see what happens with France moving forward. But they did produce a grand total of 5 build points this turn. Next up is the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is building their usual 1 convoy point. In addition to that, they are laying down a light cruiser out of the force pool, and then they are pulling a pretty good transport here, pretty expensive transport, out of the construction pool, beginning the 2nd cycle on that, and they are also pulling the Queens out of the construction pool. So looking at the Royal Navy this past turn, a realization hit me that the Commonwealth currently only has a single transport on map, which is really not good for being able to move their ground and air resources around the maps like they're going to have to if they find themselves at war with somebody like Germany, Italy, or Japan. So the Commonwealth decided to try to correct that as quickly as possible. They have been building transports. They've just been ending up in the construction pool over the last several turns, and fortunately they had those sitting in the construction pool to pull out and begin working on. Just a brief glance at the circle here, you can see that there's at least 1, now 2, 3 that will be out by the end of the year. So they'll quadruple their sea lift capacity by the end of 1939, probably just in the nick of time. That all cost to the Commonwealth a grand total of 11 build points. Now for China, China found herself deep in the hole and financially. Producing 4 certainly helped, but she's still a little constrained on what exactly she can spend on building. She decided to go with a cavalry unit for a grand total of 2 build points, and as you can see, this will end up being a communist cavalry unit, but I think at this point just any yellow piece they can get on the map will suffice for China. The last of the major powers is the United States, and they are going to lay down a battleship for a total of 2 build points. That's going to bring them to a grand total of 0 money on hand. Now again, remember, they were bidding for a political option this turn that they did not get to try to take advantage of. So I think they're planning on conserving a little bit of money. They know they're going to end up going into debt next turn more than likely, but they want to get that political option off, so they're going to limit their production here just a little bit. Now, moving on to the Spanish. The Spanish nationalists built nothing because they have nothing in their force pool. The Republicans, on the other hand, do still have a few units there, and they are going to be building an infantry corps, which will arrive here in a couple of turns. You can see they already have a motorized corps scheduled to arrive in July, August. So July, August should be a pretty good turn as far as reinforcements go. The nationalists see that. They know they've got, they're on a bit of a clock now to try and make a big push and get the situation to the point where these extra reinforcements for the Republicans really aren't going to be enough to stabilize things or to turn the tide. And with that, we've wrapped up production, which means we are ready to move on to May, June. And I know this was a fairly short turn, very uneventful turn on map. We did have at least a little more excitement going on in the political phase. That's going to happen from time to time in these type of campaign games where we've got a combination of Days of Decision and World in Flames. Of course, the bad weather really didn't help. Neither did the extremely early end to the whiff turn. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here today. This may be a little bit shorter video than we've had recently, but I don't think that's a problem. It's a nice break point here. May, June should see better weather almost definitely, which means we're going to have a lot more action both in Spain and in China at the very least. And we'll see what other political shenanigans various major powers are planning for then. So with that being it for today, appreciate everybody watching as usual. Take care, and we'll see you next time.